It was a Tuesday afternoon, 15 years after I started my journey as a single parent. My two daughters, Emily and Jessica, stood across from me in the sterile courtroom, their eyes filled with a strange mix of defiance and eagerness. Then, the judge finalized their adoption by Mark, their mother's new husband, and a cold dread washed over me. I should have seen it coming, but I was blinded by my love for them. I'll never forget the look on their faces that day. Hi everyone. I'm Sarah, and I want to share this story with you. A story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimately, redemption. It's still hard for me to talk about, even now. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Your support means the world to me. For 15 years, it had just been the three of us. After their mother, Susan, left, I poured every ounce of my being into raising Emily and Jessica.
I worked tirelessly, juggling 2 jobs to ensure they had everything they needed: a good home, a good education, and, most importantly, my unwavering love and support. We celebrated birthdays with homemade cakes, spent summer evenings chasing fireflies in the backyard, and navigated the choppy waters of adolescence together. Susan, on the other hand, remained a peripheral figure in their lives. She'd call occasionally, send birthday cards, and make promises to visit, promises she rarely kept. Then, 5 years ago, she re-entered our lives with a new husband in tow, Mark. He was charming, successful, and eager to play the role of the doting stepfather. At first, I was relieved. Maybe this was what my daughters needed. A stable male figure, a sense of normalcy that I, as a single mother, couldn't provide. But something about Mark always felt off. His smiles seemed a little too practiced, his generosity a little too calculated. He showered the girls with expensive gifts, took them on lavish vacations, and whispered promises of a future filled with endless possibilities. I couldn't compete with that. I didn't have the money, the resources, or the flashy lifestyle. Slowly, subtly, Mark began to drive a wedge between me and my daughters. He'd make snide remarks about my humble lifestyle, question my parenting decisions, and subtly imply that I was holding them back from achieving their full potential. Susan, blinded by her newfound happiness, did nothing to stop him. In fact, she seemed to encourage it. The girls, eager to embrace the life of luxury and privilege that Mark offered, began to distance themselves from me.
They started spending more time at Susan and Mark's house, missing our weekly movie nights, and becoming increasingly dismissive of my opinions. I felt like I was losing them, watching them slip through my fingers like grains of sand. Then came the bombshell. One evening, Emily and Jessica sat me down at the kitchen table, their faces etched with a seriousness that belied their age. "Mom," Emily began, "we've decided we want Mark to adopt us." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my breath catch in my throat, my heart pounding in my chest. "What?" I managed to croak out. "We want to be part of Mark's family," Jessica chimed in. "He can give us a better life, a life you can't provide." I tried to reason with them, to explain how much I loved them, how much I had sacrificed for them. But my words fell on deaf ears.
They were already gone, their hearts and minds consumed by the allure of Mark's promises. The adoption process was swift and painless. Susan and Mark hired a high-powered lawyer who navigated the legal complexities with ease. I, on the other hand, couldn't afford decent representation. I felt like I was standing on the sidelines, watching my life unravel before my eyes. The day the adoption was finalized was one of the worst days of my life. Seeing my daughters legally become someone else's children, severing the bond that had held us together for so long, was a pain I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. As they hugged Mark and Susan, their faces beaming with joy, I couldn't help but feel a pang of bitterness, a sense of betrayal that cut deeper than any knife.
What I didn't know then was that their decision had far-reaching consequences that would ultimately come back to haunt them. My mother, their grandmother, had established a $2 million trust fund for Emily and Jessica, to be accessed when they turned 25. However, the trust stipulated that the funds would only be available to them if I was their legal guardian at that time. With the adoption, the trust was voided, the money reverting back to me. I didn't tell them. I watched from a distance, a silent observer, as they basked in the glow of their newfound privilege. Mark bought them expensive cars, designer clothes, and promised to pay for their college educations without them needing to work a day in their life. They seemed to have it all: completely oblivious to the storm that was brewing on the horizon.
Then, one fateful evening, I received a phone call from an old family friend, a financial advisor who had handled my mother's estate. "Sarah," he said, his voice grave, "I think you need to know something about Mark's." He proceeded to tell me about Mark's failing business ventures, his mounting debts, and his questionable financial dealings. Apparently, Mark's image of wealth and success was a carefully constructed facade, built on a foundation of borrowed money and empty promises. He was drowning in debt, desperately trying to keep his head above water. My blood ran cold. I realized then that Mark hadn't adopted my daughters out of love or a genuine desire to be their father. He had done it for the money, for the $2 million trust fund that he believed was within his grasp. And now that the trust was gone, he was desperate, teetering on the brink of financial ruin.
That's when the seed of revenge was planted in my heart. It wasn't a sudden, impulsive decision, but a slow, deliberate process of planning and strategizing. I knew I couldn't confront Mark directly. He would deny everything, manipulate the situation, and turn my daughters against me even further. No, I needed to be smart, calculated, and patient. I needed to expose him for who he truly was, to reveal his lies and deceptions to the world. I started gathering information, meticulously documenting Mark's financial misdeeds, his unpaid debts, and his fraudulent business practices. I spoke to his former business partners, his creditors, and even a few disgruntled employees who had been cheated out of their hard-earned money. The more I learned, the more disgusted I became. Mark was a con man, a manipulator, and a liar. And he was using my daughters as pawns in his twisted game.
As I delved deeper into Mark's life, I uncovered a particularly disturbing detail. He had taken out a life insurance policy on himself, naming Emily and Jessica as the beneficiaries. The policy was worth several $1,000,000, and the premiums were astronomical. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was planning something sinister, something that would benefit him financially at the expense of my daughter's well-being. That's when I decided to act. I knew I had to protect my daughters, even if they didn't realize they needed protecting. I contacted a private investigator, a former FBI agent with a reputation for uncovering the truth. I shared my findings with him, my suspicions about Mark's insurance policy, and my fears for my daughter's safety. The investigator took my case seriously. He launched a discreet investigation into Mark's background, his finances, and his personal life. Within weeks, he had uncovered a treasure trove of incriminating evidence, proof of Mark's fraudulent business dealings, his mounting debts, and his suspicious insurance policy. He even uncovered evidence that Mark had been involved in a previous insurance fraud scheme, a scheme that had resulted in the death of his former business partner. Armed with this information, I knew I had to act quickly. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to expose Mark before he could do any more damage to my daughters or to anyone else. I decided to throw an adoption party, a seemingly celebratory event to commemorate Emily and Jessica's new family. I invited all of Mark and Susan's friends, their business associates, and even a few of my own acquaintances. I wanted everyone to witness Mark's downfall, to see him for the fraud that he was. The party was held at a swanky restaurant downtown. The champagne flowed freely, the hors d'oeuvres with kegwis were exquisite, and the atmosphere was festive. Mark and Susan beamed with pride as they mingled with their guests, basking in the glow of their seemingly perfect life. Emily and Jessica, dressed in designer dresses and dripping in expensive jewelry, looked like they were living a fairy tale. As the evening progressed, I took to the stage, a microphone in hand. My heart pounded in my chest. My palms were sweaty, but my voice was steady and resolute. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my eyes scanning the room. "I know many of you are here to celebrate Emily and Jessica's adoption by Mark, and while I wish them nothing but happiness, I feel it's important for you to know the truth about the man they now call their father." A hush fell over the room.
Mark's face paled, Susan's eyes widened in alarm, and Emily and Jessica looked at me with a mixture of confusion and apprehension. I proceeded to lay out the evidence I had gathered, meticulously detailing Mark's financial misdeeds, his unpaid debts, and his fraudulent business practices. I presented documents, recordings, and even a few eyewitness testimonies that exposed Mark's lies and deceptions. The room was silent, save for the occasional gasp of disbelief. Mark's face grew redder and redder with each revelation. Susan began to cry, her perfect facade crumbling before her eyes. Emily and Jessica stood frozen, their faces etched with a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and dawning realization. But I wasn't finished. I then revealed Mark's suspicious life insurance policy and my fears that he was planning something sinister.
I shared the evidence I had uncovered about his previous involvement in an insurance fraud scheme, a scheme that had resulted in the death of his former business partner. The effect was immediate and devastating. People began to whisper, to point, to cast accusatory glances at Mark. His friends and business associates distanced themselves from him, their faces filled with disgust and betrayal. Susan stormed out of the room, sobbing uncontrollably. Emily and Jessica, their faces stained with tears, ran after her. Mark stood alone on the stage, his reputation shattered, his lies exposed, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. He tried to deny the accusations, to claim that I was a bitter, jealous ex-wife seeking revenge. But his words rang hollow, devoid of credibility. The evidence was overwhelming, the truth undeniable. The aftermath of the party was swift and decisive. Mark's business collapsed, his assets were seized, and he was facing multiple lawsuits and criminal charges. Susan, devastated by his betrayal, filed for divorce. Emily and Jessica, ostracized by their friends and peers, were left to grapple with the consequences of their actions. Their university enrollments were canceled due to Mark's fraudulent financial aid applications. The schools did not take kindly to Mark falsifying documents and inflating his income to get them accepted and receive grants. They were essentially blacklisted, unable to secure a place at any reputable institution. The life of luxury and privilege they had come to expect was gone, replaced by a harsh and unforgiving reality. A few months later, I received a phone call from Emily. Her voice was hesitant, apologetic, and filled with remorse. "Mom?" she said. "We're so sorry. We were wrong about Mark."
You lied to us, he manipulated us, and he ruined our lives. Jessica echoed her sister's sentiments. We miss you, Mom. We miss our life with you. We want to come home. I paused, considering their words. Part of me wanted to slam the phone down, to tell them that they had made their bed and now they had to lie in it. But another part of me, the part that still loved them unconditionally, couldn't bear to abandon them in their time of need. Come over, I said finally. We need to talk. When they arrived at my house, they looked like different people. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and t-shirts. The expensive jewelry was nowhere to be seen. Their faces were pale, their eyes were haunted, and their spirits were broken. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where they had told me they wanted to be adopted by Mark.
I listened as they poured out their hearts, confessing their mistakes, expressing their remorse, and begging for my forgiveness. "We know we messed up, Mom," Emily said, her voice trembling. "We were blinded by the money, the lifestyle, the promises Mark made. We didn't realize how much we were hurting you until it was too late. We want to make things right, Mom," Jessica added. "We want to earn your trust back. We want to be a family again." I looked at them, really looked at them, and I saw a glimmer of hope, a spark of genuine remorse. I knew it wouldn't be easy, that rebuilding our relationship would take time, effort, and a lot of forgiveness. But I was willing to give them a second chance. "I'm willing to let you come back home," I said, "but it won't be the same as before. You'll have to earn my trust back, one step at a time. And there will be rules, strict rules, that you'll have to follow." I outlined my conditions. They would have to agree to a legally binding loan agreement, with interest, to repay me for the money I would spend on their education. They would have to maintain a certain GPA in college, work part-time jobs, to contribute to their expenses, and attend regular therapy sessions to address their emotional issues. They would also have to agree to be financially transparent, allowing me to monitor their spending and ensure they were being responsible with their money. They hesitated for a moment, considering the terms. But they quickly realized that they had no other choice. They were desperate, and I was their only hope. "We agree," Emily said, her voice resolute. "We'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." Jessica nodded in agreement. "We'll sign the contract, we'll follow the rules, we'll do everything you ask." And so, they did. They signed the loan agreement, they enrolled in college, they got part-time jobs, and they started attending therapy. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, challenges, and moments of doubt. But they persevered, driven by their desire to rebuild our relationship and to prove that they had learned from their mistakes. Slowly, gradually, Our family began to heal. Emily and Jessica started to take responsibility for their actions, to appreciate the value of hard work and financial independence, and to understand the true meaning of family. I, in turn, learned to forgive, to let go of the resentment and bitterness that had consumed me for so long. I realized that holding on to anger only hurt myself, and that true healing could only come through forgiveness.
In the end, we emerged from the ashes stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real, honest, and built on a foundation of mutual respect and responsibility. As for Susan and Mark, they faced the consequences of their actions. Susan, heartbroken and humiliated, retreated from public life, her reputation tarnished, her dreams shattered. Mark, facing financial ruin and criminal charges, was left to wallow in his own misery. I, on the other hand, moved on with my life. I focused on my career, my hobbies, and my relationships with friends and family. I traveled the world, pursued my passions, and lived each day to the fullest. I found peace, happiness, and a sense of fulfillment that I never thought possible. And that's when I realized that revenge, while initially satisfying, wasn't the answer.
True happiness didn't come from tearing others down, but from building myself up. It came from forgiveness, from healing, and from living a life filled with purpose and meaning. It came from second chances. It came from knowing that in the face of adversity, I had the strength to rise above, to overcome, and to emerge victorious. And that's the story of how my daughters humiliated me and how I helped them find their way back. A story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimately, redemption. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel for more such stories.